Surprise me.
Now.
Yeah, I told you. Ooh, yeah. Coming home. Yeah.
Okay, good morning, Timothy, and good morning to everybody watching this Japanese Politics One-on-One episode where we are going to talk about the latest events in Japanese politics, in the LDP, in the parliament, and also in the economy as well. So, welcome once again. And Timothy, well, thank you very much for being here. Today, you're reporting from your home office, I believe, right? And
That's right.
congratulations on the wedding of your daughter. So the pictures were so beautiful, and thank you very much for sharing them with us. It's wonderful to have you back, and welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Maya, and thank you to everybody who sent their well wishes and teasing remarks to me. And yes, thank you for appreciating and tolerating the snafu we had technically last week on the briefing. I apologize for that.
Well, it happens, of course, but today we're going to do better, I believe. And to everybody watching us, please remember to tell us that you have been here. Show us that you have been with us today by hitting follow if you haven't followed us yet, or subscribe if you haven't done that yet. And of course, leave your thoughts and comments so that we can address them in the Q&A session.
Yeah.
At the end of the briefing. And as Timothy says, there is a lot of value in those questions and comments because we also learn a lot from you. Of course, there is a lot that we cannot cover in these episodes, but your help and your participation makes these episodes really valuable for us as well. Thank you for that. Also, please feel free to share these episodes if you think that they are helpful for you, your family members,
Yeah.
and friends and colleagues. Timothy, over to you now.
Thank you very much, Maya. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. Today is the last day of August. Maya, by tomorrow, we will have survived yet another month together. This is episode
Okay, that's such
238.
a scary thing.
It is a little bit. But August has been so blisteringly hot. It is still hot. Tokyo is suffering from the onslaught of high temperatures, but it's not only here. But I'm back in Tokyo, back from the wedding ceremony, and thank you again, everybody, for celebrating and congratulating me. I've got 3 more kids that have not yet been or have not gotten married yet. So the youngest is out. So I've got 3 more to go, and I just really appreciate everybody sticking with us and also, kind of bearing with us. You would think after 238 sessions, Maya, we would have a smooth transition here, but things happen, and we're not professionals at this, but we are dedicated to giving you some insight into what's going on in Japanese politics. Some of the stuff we talk about has only a subliminal or maybe a tertiary impact on politics, but we bring it to you, and like Maya said, the Q&A really brings up the meat of the issues, and we can talk a little bit more deeply about those. But my purpose here is to kind of tell you what's going on in Japanese politics this last week, what's likely to happen next week, and what to watch out for. So we'll continue that today. And actually, it's just been an incredible run, 238. And you've stuck with us, and we really appreciate it. We always start with the yen. The yen closed out at 146.82 to the dollar, and the pressure is building around the Bank of Japan and the Jackson Hole. There was a summit at Jackson Hole just this last week, a big deal. The Bank of Japan Governor Ueda was there too. I'm going to report on that. The Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, was in Tokyo this Friday, Saturday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, a big deal. He moves on from meeting with the Prime Minister and spending a good bit of time here to China, and to discuss economic security would be his focus. Very different from Mr. Lee's visit from South Korea. He was first. He was on Monday and Tuesday, and it was a landmark visit for him, his first foreign visit, and he hit Japan. And then he went to the United States. And so there's a big deal going on there, and some some new visa arrangements. So this relationship between Japan and South Korea, really bolstered by former President Yoon, is going to be picked up by Mr. Lee, and it looks like there's going to be some momentum that's carrying forward. We're going to report a little bit more about that. TCAD, as you might remember, 38 countries from Africa were in Japan, in Yokohama, 3 days, ended, I think, on Saturday of last week. And Japan is trying to position itself a little more friendly and as an alternative in Africa. I'd like to report a little bit about that. The LDP recall debate intensifies. There's a lot going on this next week. There's a lot that happened this week. There's a committee to decide to survey all of the LDP members, the Diet members, and also the 47 prefectural committees to see if they want to have an election for a new prime minister. That is becoming coming to a head this next week, and I'd like to report to you about that. There's a gasoline tax fight, the consumer stimulus uncertainty, and exports continue to be slipping. So that puts pressure on the finance and the Bank of Japan and the yen rate and just so many other things that the prime minister is trying to fight a rearguard battle out. I'm going to talk about that. Defense is always in the news. There's a big deal going on there. Japan's commitment to bring defense spending to 2% has received more of a boost. They're issuing the largest defense budget this year. This is year 3 for the 5-year plan to bring Japan from 1% to 2%. And they're really focusing on drones. You might remember Nakatani, the Minister of Defense, was in Turkey. One of the things that he was exploring there was drone production and technology. And it looks like Japan is going to go hard on drones in the southern part of Japan. And North Korea continues to celebrate. I don't know if you've seen it on TV, but there've been celebrations all week long with our great leader welcoming families of soldiers who were sent to the Ukraine battle. Some of them are not coming back, and he celebrated and awarded medals to some of the other ones. But there's a big deal going on there to kind of glorify this strategy of supplementing Russian forces in their battle. And it looks like it's building a little bit of momentum there. And on the other side, when Mr. Lee was visiting with Mr. Trump this last week, he did impress upon him, why don't you get involved in solving this North-South issue with North Korea and South Korea? We would really appreciate it. And it requires a little bit more of a discussion. So with regard to domestic intrigue, the Aizawa survey, Mr. Akazawa's canceled trip, he was supposed to leave on Thursday. He canceled it suddenly and didn't leave. There's a lot of concern and consternation going on there. I mean, the Trump tariffs are really going to bite hard, and getting a little bit more security and confidence in what those numbers are and when they're going to be implemented apparently has caused him to withdraw his projected trip. So I'll dive into these individual issues, and then we can go into those issues that are important to you in the Q&A session. But for right now, let me turn it over to you, Maya, before I get into the individual issues.
Thank you, Timothy. Yes, and to everybody who hasn't been with us long enough to hear about the newsletter, basically these briefings are also put into paper, and we produce a synopsis that is sent out a couple of days after the briefing, usually by the middle of the next week. And if you haven't subscribed yet for the newsletter, let us know. You can do that also on Langley Squire's account on LinkedIn, or you can just message me and I'll help you do that. And there is one more thing which I would like to announce today. Timothy, I'm sorry that I didn't bring it to you just before we started, but you probably part of our listeners and viewers belong also to YCAPS. They're members of YCAPS, and I wanted to let you know that YCAPS is organizing an event on September 6th from 1:30, and the event is Whitecaps Professional Baseball Experience. So that's when Yokohama Bay Stars will play versus Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters, and you can watch the game with members of Whitecaps. If you are interested in participating in this event, please message Richard Walton. So he is on LinkedIn. He's going to share the link of the event in the comments of this briefing on LinkedIn, and then you'll find the link later also in the comment section of YouTube. That's all for the moment with Whitecaps, but please once again remember it's Richard Walton on LinkedIn. Okay, Timothy, I'm sorry for taking a little bit time longer than usual to do this. Now let's go back to the details of this briefing.
Okay, that's great. It's wonderful that YCAPS is sponsoring that. A lot of people, who even long-term residents, haven't been to a Japanese baseball game, which is a very different experience than going to a U.S. or any other country's baseball game. I mean, the Japanese do it in their own way, and it is really something to not just see, but to participate in. So my hat's off to YCAPS for sponsoring this.
Very much
a
so.
pretty big deal.
And one more thing, every non-member of YCAPS is welcome to join as well. Yes, even if you're not a member, please feel free to reach out to Richard and check out the link.
Great. Thank you, Maya, and thank you very much, Richard and YCAPS, for extending that invitation. So once again, the yen closed out on Friday at 146.80 to the dollar. That's not too much different than the way it was last week or the week before that, but this keeps well below the psychological 150 line, but concerns really persist. Tokyo's August Consumer Price Index was released on Friday, and the inflation is just unrelenting. The Bank of Japan says we want it to be at around 2%. It's probably closer to 3%, 3.1%. It would have been worse if there wasn't the stimulus in gasoline and in price controls, but it's really giving the market quite the jitters. And the Bank of Japan Governor Ueda would join global central bankers in Jackson Hole, and U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent was also there. He used this as a platform to voice concerns about the yen's weakness. And it was a pretty stark comment coming from him that the Japanese Bank of Japan is not really pulling its weight, and it's going to get worse unless it gets better quickly. And he was just echoing Washington's desire for more stability in the markets. The global context matters. And in Spain, if you've been following the news, they have been punishing a heat wave, 10 days, unrelenting, record-breaking heat wave that's just punishing the entire economy there, crippling crops, and fires are raging across southern Europe and in fact in Greece as well. That happened last year around this time. And so the inflationary pressures are not just on Japan, but they're actually global. And the Bank of Japan's September 19th and 20th policy meeting looms as a real next pivotal point that we're going to be watching. But it's almost 3 weeks away from now. So there's a lot to be going on there. We always focus on what's going on with the diplomatic agenda of the prime minister. And he was really busy this last week. South Korea President Lee visited on Monday and Tuesday. And then Modi was here on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So that's pretty big. And that's following, 38 members from Africa, leaders from Africa. I mean, these are state visits. They're not actually state visits, but they're leaders of state that are visiting Japan, 38 of them. He welcomed each one of them in the prime minister's residence, but that was, nobody gets even their flags raised up on the throughout Nagata-cho as it was yesterday. The Indian flag was flying in full splendor throughout Nagata-cho. But boy, what a tumultuous last 2 weeks. When the South Korean president visited on Tokyo, it was his first overseas destination. So that's important that he visits Japan, as you might think is appropriate, but it just hasn't really happened in that kind of a pattern before. And so this is symbolically powerful. The two leaders announced expanding working holiday visas and pledged to build on the reconciliation process that began under Yoon. And as for the visas, there's a a 3-month visa that is available for Japanese who want to go to Korea and Koreans who want to come to Japan. 3 months. They can work, study, they can work, vacation, they can earn some money while they're here. That's not available to all countries, all visitors, all tourists. But what they did was they expanded it. It can be expanded now for an additional 3 months. So that's 6 months. And so it does show you this process of trying to bring the two countries and the two peoples together. And that echoes also what Mr. Lee said with Trump. Could you please help us with North Korea? I mean, if you get involved in it, I will commit to it. I want the solution for us to get reconciled together. And North Korea just announced, I think they put it in their constitution, that South Korea is now their number one enemy, whereas before they were brothers and they were trying to close that gap. So there's a lot going on there. And I think President Lee feels that and senses that maybe the President of the United States has the power and the ability and the kind of posture to do something. And I think the President committed that he would go visit North Korea before this year is out. So that's really soon. And as I said, Japan hosted TCAD in Yokohama, and there are lots of commitments. More than 300 MOUs were executed between Japan and many of these countries, or between these countries and themselves, foreign free trade agreements within Africa, to kind of stress the human capital investment as Japan's alternative to China's debt diplomacy. And that followed up with the South Korean visit, but more importantly, the Indian Prime Minister visit, who was here until just yesterday. And we expect the unveiling of new economic security framework with India. And India is huge. It's probably behind. It's not quite there yet, but India's got the most populous country in the world, and it is highly educated and a huge market. But they're somewhat straddling two different worlds. They're under pressure, a huge tariff, because they're still purchasing oil from Russia. And so the fact that Mr. Modi finishes with Japan and goes to China, it sends a kind of deliberate signal, I sense. And so it's really important to keep our eyes on this. Defense Minister Nakatani, he was in Turkey 2 weeks ago. He'll travel to Seoul in September, just in a couple of days. This will be the first such defense ministerial in nearly a decade. So it does show that there's things that are going on. The domestic agenda has really been lively, but this next week will be explosive. So the committee for the LDP to decide, does the LDP members want to have an election for LDP president? So there is an article in the composition of the LDP that if 50% of the members don't, or they wish for it, doesn't say that they don't like the prime minister, but they wish for an election, even while the office is still being valid. So Mr. Ishiba's term of office doesn't end for another 2.5 years. So there's a lot of, what are we going to do if there's another election and we lose again? I mean, we've had 3 disastrous election results. One of the things that's going on is figuring out whose fault it is. We kind of know this is kind of under wraps, but that report is due this next Wednesday, and it's the same time that the LDP's election committee, having already met twice, will kind of report. We've surveyed most of the LDP members. We've surveyed the 47 prefectural councils and figured out who wants to have an election. So when they say they want to have an election, it means that they don't like the current prime minister. And one of the issues here is they must submit their intention with their name. So it's not a secret ballot. So consider, if you're a member of the parliament and you're being asked, do you want to kick the bum out, or are you okay with it? And he's going to know the way that you voted. And not only that, but if there is an election for prime minister, because more than 50% of all of the LDP and 50% of the prefectures decided that we want to have another election. One of the candidates is going to be the current prime minister. So it's a huge gamble. He's got the bully pulpit. He is the prime minister. And if you vote, I want to kick the bum out, or I like him, but I just want to have an election, you know, in the next cabinet, in the next couple of committee appointments, you're not going to have a voice. You're not going to have a vote. And so it's really, it's a very delicate situation. Mr. Ishiba dined with former Prime Minister Koizumi just last week. And, you know, one of the discussions that they must have had is, you know, how do you like my son? My son's doing really well as agriculture minister. Apparently, the swelling of appreciation for Mr. Koizumi as agriculture minister, there are pluses and there are minuses. Not everything has worked with rice and the availability of stockpiled rice. There's been some snafus there. But still, Mr. Younger Koizumi is being rated highly by LDP members and by the general population as somebody who's handsome, he's young, he's doing a good job, and he should be prime minister. So that noise is coming up too. As we all know, his father has said, you're too young to be a candidate for prime minister, although he put himself out there, probably against his father's wishes. But the fact that the prime minister had dinner with his father is pretty interesting, something to watch. And this story just hasn't reached its end yet. Ryosei Akazawa's abrupt canceling of his trip to the U.S. yesterday really shakes things up, and it makes people wonder, you know, what is the United States doing here? Why are they playing such hardball? And why does the Japan negotiators, they're moving forward and they're so upset, there's so much frustration, they canceled it. They kind of snub their nose, you know, I'm not going until you agree to the things that we shook hands on, and then we move forward based on that. You can't keep moving the goalpost. You can't keep moving the checkerboard and expect us to kind of just swallow it and go along. It's just not going to happen that way. So the fact that South Korea was here and Mr. Modi was here, there's a lot of in play here. Not just that, but also with defense spending and things like that. So the Moriyama report on the upper house losses is expected to be produced on Tuesday. That's the same day that the election results, not the election results, but the survey of, do you want a new election, or are you okay with the current situation? That letter will be issued on that day. And I think they have a week to respond to that. So the letter from the LDP will be issued to all of the LDP members and to the 47 prefectural councils. And probably within a week, I think it's within a week, they have to respond back. If you like it the way it is, you don't respond. You just throw the letter in the trash, and that's kind of your vote. But if you want it, then you put your name to it. You have to deliver it in paper to the LDP headquarters, and we will know. It'll be 2 weeks before we really know, but I'll keep my eye on it and report to you. With regard to economic policy, there's a lot going on there. The government issued its August monthly report just on Friday. And so now Mr. Ishiba is in a position he needs to revise or withdraw his plan to give every citizen 20,000 yen. Remember, he talked about that, and people criticized him in the upper house election that this is just bribery. You're trying to give people money to vote for the LDP. And by the way, 20,000 yen is insulting. You're telling us that this will help us in these economic times. So he received a lot of criticism for that. He still does. I think he's going to withdraw on that. That's one of the issues that came up. Ishin and the Constitutional Democratic Party both say that they won't support it. But meanwhile, the ruling and opposition parties remain deadlocked over abolishing the temporary gasoline tax. So that cost just for the gasoline tax is 1.5 trillion yen. And so the disputes over whether offsets are required or it's going to be accommodated within the budget are one of the hot issues. At the same time, though, you might remember that Ishin no Kai, as Brylcreem always pushes here, is really cozying up to the LDP. And there is increasing anticipation, maybe, that the LDP, it needs to have an additional coalition partner. The two candidates are the Democratic Party for the People and Isshin no Kai. You know, Isshin no Kai is saying this gasoline tax and the Nimayan, the 20,000 yen to all of the citizens, we don't like that. And so the fact that the prime minister is pulling back on it sounds like a bit of a concession to gain a little bit more support. And also, Mr. Koizumi visited the expo just this last week, and it looked like his welcome there with Isshin no Kai, the governor of Osaka, looked like they were all buddies. And so maybe there's going to be some announcements. We expect that September is just going to be full of political and economic news. So we're going to stay on top of that and continue to report to you. Let me see. Trade data for July showed exports to the U.S. were down 10% year on year. Automobiles were down 28% by value. And overall exports fell, not just the United States, overall exports fell 2.6%. And so Japan ran its first trade deficit in 2 months. So the Ministry of Finance projects long-term interest rates at 2.6% for fiscal 2026. That's not very far away. It's going to be September. So that means in 3 more months, we've got, 2026. The Diet will open up. They'll consider the budget and they need to finish that budget by April 1st, as we all know. We're accustomed to that. So this will be, the debt servicing costs are just enormous. They've got to tap that down. That's 30 trillion yen per year just on debt servicing. The United States has its own issues too, but for Japan, that is massive. That's a huge cut into the budget that they need to collect through the consumption tax and sales tax and that sort of thing. It's important to note that Mr. Ishiba actually left Nagatacho. He toured the Kaga, a destroyer that is being built and purchased by Australia in a fleet. So he visited that. It's being converted into a light carrier for F-35s. So it's originally built as an helicopter ship, but it's being converted because the F-35s can vertically take off. And so this is a big deal. Also, the Great Britain's largest aircraft carrier, the Prince of Wales, is in Japan visiting. I think it might have deported, but it was ported and docked in Yokohama just this last week. And that's a big deal. I mean, and it's never just the aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier comes with a fleet of other service and protecting vessels. So it's a big deal. And if you're out in Yokohama or in Roppongi, you're probably running into a lot of the sailors who are in town, perhaps on furlough. So this really underscores Japan's steady defense transformation. It's not just the United States. It's not just Okinawa. It's the Philippines. It's Great Britain. It's Italy. It's Australia. This purchase of the destroyer fleet is just massive. It's a huge boost for the defense budget. And the defense budget, once again, it's swelling to 2% of GDP. They've been pushing for that. And that is going to be apparently the NATO standard now. But there's talk now of Taiwan going to 5%. And it just never ends. It's something to continue to watch. So the new business manager visa regulations will take effect very soon. This is really significant for Chinese investors. The business manager allows you to come in. It's typically, we've run them through my office. Somebody wants to start a company here. In fact, that's how CrossFit started here. We had a business manager visa issued to the person who brought a CrossFit box. The first box in Japan, we did this maybe 10 years ago, I guess. But if they bring in a certain amount of investment, which is probably around gohyakuman for the cost, and they have that as paid in capital, you can start a company and the company supports your visa. So you come in and it's been really exploited. The survey indicates that more than 50% of the exploitation is by Chinese investors, entrepreneurs. They come in, they start a company, but it's only a paper company. Maybe they buy an apartment or they buy some land or they buy a business or they start a business. And so it's undergoing a lot of scrutiny that is hurting foreigners coming in overall. But these new regulations, you can start a company with very little money if you live in Japan, as most people know. But if you're coming in as an investor, as a foreigner coming in to start a company, the regulations are really being tightened. It used to be that you could come in with, an investment of 5 million, 6 million yen. But now it's required that you bring in far more money, maybe 30 million yen, and you're required to hire somebody or two people to be on station. So you've got to hire Japanese locals or somebody who's local here full time in order to do that. So that's really going to tap down that market of people that are coming into Japan. It's not just the tourists, and the tourists are coming in huge numbers. China still hasn't reached its numbers pre-COVID, but it's getting there. But there's lots of visitors from Southeast Asia who want to set up a company here. They've come here as a tourist 4 or 5 or 6 times. They like it. They want to develop a business that facilitates that tourism, or maybe they just have a product or a channel to their country. They want to do that. Somewhat unrelated to that, excuse me, but Japan Post announced that it will refuse U.S. bound parcels. It's somewhat related to the tariffs. It's not quite tit for tat, but there's major logistics issues and tax issues because the United States has withdrawn the waiver of small parcels or factory goods that are sent in small parcels or as maybe models or as exemplary or gifts. Now they have to pay the tariff on that, and the rising costs and the inspection burdens really forced Japan Post to cancel taking those parcels. You could be doing that relatively easy. Now that's undergoing a change. This next week, those regulations will go into effect. So you're probably going to hear more about that. And if you're sending parcels to the United States, you're going to notice that very quickly. You can still get them out there. It's just more expensive. And let me see, what else is going on? I think that's basically it. The week ahead is really intense. On Tuesday, we've got 2 important meetings that are going on. The letters will be issued to the LDP members, and the Morikawa report on who's to blame for the fiasco for the upper house elections. I think probably the end result will be that he'll take the blame for it as the Secretary General, as I think is probably appropriate. Somebody needs to. It's not just because of failure of strategy or something like that. I mean, it was a big deal. What the report is actually saying is, it's not Mr. Ishiba's fault. It's the fault of the Seiwakai, because they were the ones that were pocketing the money, and because of that, people are sick of them, and that they're being sick of the LDP has a long shelf life. So it's not Ishiba's issue. It's not Suga's issue. It happened when Mr. Abe was assassinated, and then this issue came to the public eye, and now we understood that not everybody, but most of the people in the Abe faction were pocketing some of the money, and now that's really dirty, and so we don't like those. And then that ended up with the dissolution of almost all of the factions and just a complete switch of the LDP and Japanese politics in general. And in fact, the attendance to our show exploded as a consequence of that, because people are really interested. What's going on in Japan, and what happened to that guy Abe? And now at least everybody knows how to pronounce his name. It's Abe. And so there's just a global interest in what's going on, and we're very proud and honored to be a part of that information feed to you, our global audience. So thank you very much for continuing. The fires in Europe continue to cause alarm, and they intersect with Japan's political drama too. The heat wave here, I think, is going to continue throughout this next week, and then it's going to diminish quite a bit as we move into fall. But there's still plenty of us to unpack. And so let's get into the Q&A, and maybe we can get a little bit more heat and light going here. So thank you very much for attending, for listening, for sharing the love with your friends and colleagues, and for also contributing your questions. Back to you, Maya.
I got it. Okay.
Almost.
Almost, yes. Anyway, so thank you, Timothy, for this. And we are going to into the question and answer session. Well, I'll start today with a question that comes from, well, a lady. And Byron, please forgive me for putting her question first. But, well, ladies first today. And also, this question is related to the one of the topics that you mentioned at the end, towards the end of the briefing, Tim. So the question comes from Hiroku-san, and she says, PM Ishiba's popularity has seen curious rebound.
Yes.
What are the main reasons? Timothy.
You know, it's curious. This happens all the time in politics, and the voting public is rather fickle, and they can turn on a dime. And you saw that in U.S. elections too. It's not just Japanese elections. It's not just Japanese politics or the Japanese voting public. It happens in Italy. It happens in Britain. It happens in the United States. It happens here. It is surprising that, to most of us, that Mr. Ishiba is going down, down, down. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about how they're looking for a new prime minister. He really doesn't have much to stand on. He's losing his breath. He's losing his hair. He's not really having a lot of friends. And then a couple of things happen, and he's back on top. And I think one of the things, and it's a good question, one of the things is, typically we hear this, there's nobody else around. There's no good leader. You know, let's stick with what we've got. And that's just, you know, the fallback position of most Japanese. They don't like that much change. They're not really challenging the status quo. They think that the status quo has a kind of a Borg mind of its own, and people are, it's okay the way it is because we've got the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is not susceptible to this, you know, flim flam and the ups and downs. They're rather stable. They're career diplomats and bureaucrats. And what goes on in Nagatacho can be mollified by that. And he's doing a pretty good job. And I think by all extents, most people would say he's not doing a terrible job. He hasn't made major snafus. He hasn't really angered the population. He seems to have his nose to the grindstone. He's working hard. He's had no major scandals. He had one scandal with the agricultural minister, just kind of saying something like, rice, the price of rice? I don't know. I got tons of rice. You know, people give me rice all the time. What I know about rice? And he resigned. He resigned 3 days after saying that. Other than that, there has been very little. And we've had great scandals in the past, right, in Japanese politics. So not having them, I think, is rather significant. And I think that's probably the reason why. Also, he has to thank Koizumi for giving him a little bit of a boost.
Right. I believe that even though there are not so many of these people in the government, there are still the members of the government who are worried about continuity and how it will be seen from politicians out of Japan. I mean, foreign politicians, right? Because if we have somebody who's here for a year or year and a half, then it doesn't really project a good image.
That's right.
So, right. And even though, once again, more and more members are obviously inclined to seek presidential election within the LDP and also think about the next prime minister of Japan, there are some people there who are worried, concerned actually about continuity.
So if Mr. Ishiba said, I'm not going to run, I'm sick of you guys. I've had what I could achieve. I've achieved. I'm going to turn it up. It would be a completely different situation.
Right.
But since he's the incumbent, and since if there's going to be a new election for LDP president, he's also going to be a candidate. Can you imagine running? You know, you're just not going to have a cabinet seat. You're not going to have a committee appointment. You're not going to do anything, even though you're within the same party. That will fracture the LDP. There's a lot of that still going on. The very conservative wing, which is headed by the young lady who is on the very right-hand wing.
Takaichi-san?
Takaichi sensei. So she's kind of pulling that group together, and there has been some talk. Look, the smaller parties seem to be gaining a lot of attention from voters, and the LDP is so big. Let's break it up, and maybe we can also gain lots of voter support because we're not this big monolith. And even Takaichi Sensei has said that's not a good recipe. Stay tight, stay together. We can solve our issues within the terms of the party. And maybe it's not what we all like, but there is power in having this many Diet members all under one roof. And I think that that's probably the way that it will go. But yeah, there's a lot of temptation there to break off and to say, I don't like the way this decision is being made, and I want to have more power and more ability to represent my committee and my community. Yeah, it's volatile, but I don't think it's going to collapse.
All right, thank you for this. And now moving to the questions that came actually last week from Byron. Byron, first of all, thank you very much for sharing them on this thread, today's thread. It helps a lot, and it's very much appreciated, your consideration. So Byron writes, Timothy, thank you for kindly trying to do the broadcast last week despite the technical issues and the wedding of your daughter.
It was a valiant effort.
It was, yeah. Thank you. And Byron, apologies for not getting any bro cream.
Brill cream.
Yes. Obviously, Timothy was busy there. There was no time for shopping. All right. And then, so here we've got the questions from Byron. Number one, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent keeps claiming that Japan will contribute $550 billion to a U.S. sovereign wealth fund for investments in the U.S. as directed by President Trump.
Right.
If this is true, from which account would such a huge amount be drawn? From GPIF, the massive government pension fund, or foreign reserves of Japan, or other?
Okay, so there was an interview with Secretary of Commerce Ludnick just this last week. I didn't read the full report. I should have prepared a little bit better for this question, and I apologize. But yes, there's a lot of concern and curiosity about, is this really a commitment? And if it is, where is this money coming from? And so I think we have to deal with the first issue first. Is this a real commitment, or is this just a projection? We were projected over the next 10 years to have this kind of investment in the United States. And because of negotiations with the President of the United States, we decided to make the number a little bit bigger. But it's just a projection about trade and investment and trade flows and that sort of thing, unrelated to the value of the yen. So the value of the yen, we report on it always first thing in our briefing, because the value of the yen really encourages Japanese exports, or it diminishes them because the amount of imports, the costs are high or low. So I think the report, maybe we can circulate that later. I don't know, Maya. It is a big issue, and I don't think I certainly don't know the answer to it. But I think it's there if you read the interview with Commerce Secretary Lutnick. I think it was on Thursday.
Right. Okay. And yes, the interview is online, so it is available if you do a search there. I encourage everybody who is interested in the details to do the search and read it. All right. And moving on to the next question by Byron. The Osaka Expo 2025 in the draining heat of the summer is winding down to a close on October 13th. It appears that it may just about break even, and then will the massive expo infrastructure on Umenoshima Island be destroyed? What is going to happen there? Was the point of the whole expo to draw attention to Osaka as a potential second capital for Japan and associated opportunity for Ishin to join the LDP-led coalition and cabinet? Timothy.
That's a mouthful. So first of all, the Umenoshima land, it's a landfill. And the reason why the expo was there is to kind of help expand Umenoshima and put that on the map and build a train line out there. So now there's a train line which was built because of the expo, but it has facilitation far beyond the expo. So the expo is 6 months. Countries come in. I don't know how many countries actually built the pavilions or are sharing pavilions, but I think there's probably 28 of them. And then they've got this huge circular edifice built by lumber, completely built by lumber. It's beautiful. That is not going to be dismantled, I don't believe. But if it is, at least that lumber can be reused. The pavilions, some of them are like temporary. They're not going to be useful for very long, but they don't need to necessarily be disbanded. So they might make this Yume no Shima more like Makuhari in Tokyo, a huge convention center, put hotels, and so the first part is the expo, and train people to know that it's there, that it's beautiful, that the access is easy, and that sort of thing, and then to develop it economically. There was some issue about the casinos, as you might recall, the casino issue that's been largely resolved. It has become law that Japan can support the integrated resorts, but I don't think Yume no Shima is a site that they had considered. But with regard to making Osaka the second capital, that's something irrespective of what was going on with the expo. That's a demand or a dream of Osaka the entire time. To get these stuffy, stuck-up, Tokyo guys, to give up some of the power that they've amassed, because everything is centralized in Tokyo. 10%, more than 10% of the entire population of Japan is in Tokyo. That's huge. So all of the things that are important, the center of government, the center of art and society, probably not food culture. I think Osaka would claim that. And certainly the funny capital of the world is Osaka, as people in Osaka would strongly claim. But there's always this tension. This tension has been going on for centuries. So yes, it's always been a claim, and probably, Ishin joining forces with the LDP. I think Brylcreem he's got something there. It could be that they make concessions there. The LDP says, okay, we'll make you the second capital, and we'll keep our powder dry should something happen to Tokyo. It's not necessarily going to be the secondary capital that's an hour outside of Tokyo. We'll make it Osaka. Okay, so let's shake hands on that. But who knows how that will ever pan out? And in fact, if there is going to be a major disaster, it's predicted to be further south rather than up towards Fukushima. So it's just as likely that Osaka would be hit harder than Tokyo in such an event. So it's a great question. It's mostly speculation, so I apologize. Was there another part of that question that I missed?
It was about the Brylcreem, whether it is available anymore. All right. So, okay, and then we move on to the next question, which is on LinkedIn from Mr. Hidefumi Doi. He says, JICA announced that they will welcome immigrants from 4 African countries, and many Japanese became almost furious on social media. Yesterday, they organized protests against JICA. This is quite a rare case in Japan. How do you evaluate this?
This is delicate, and please don't draw more out of this than necessary. But you will remember, under the Nakasone administration, he allowed visas to be extended to, I think it was Nigeria. And soon after that, after a little bit of time, there were lots of visas and visa applications coming in from Nigeria. And within months, Roppongi was populated with these guys that are selling girls. They're selling all sorts of things. And Roppongi became almost, dangerous. All of a sudden, it just became infiltrated with lots of guys from Africa. I don't know if you remember this, Maya, but it was a pretty big deal, and it changed the color of Roppongi. In the current situation, there are 4 countries. What JICA did is they initiated several sister city relationships with these African nations. So Karuizawa, for example, has a sister city relationship with, I think it's Nairobi. I'm not sure. It's one of those countries. And what the people are saying is, wait a minute, we have a sister city relationship, and they're offering these visas and these extension of work study and that sort of thing. And it will be focused in Karuizawa. that, what is that going to do to Karuizawa? We're going to have, you know, an influx of people looking for jobs from Africa. They don't speak Japanese. They're bringing their family or whatever. That's the issue. And I think JICA is actually pulling back from that. And that's the consternation that was caused, that these cities, they have the sister city relationship or something like a sister city relationship. And they're trying to move the ball forward with Africa and Japan. So if you followed what went on with TCAD, a lot of it is just, it's just words. You know, we want to be friendly. We want to extend trade. We have, you know, funds available if you supplied. It hasn't changed anything. It's the same. If you have a project that is worthy of JICA or economic development, overseas development from Japan, you don't need TCAD to kind of embellish that. So I think it was just you know, let's come together and let's talk about what we can do together. But there were a couple of issues that were addressed that really have bones on them, and one of them is the issue that you're raising now, and that's what's caused the uproar. I think JICA is going to pull back on that because it has caused such a furor. People are really angry about it.
Yes, and it seems also that there was also level of misinterpretation on the side of those countries as well. So the way they announced everything, and also Rossi, thank you very much for helping us because Rossi writes in the comments, Hisashi Matsumoto, Parliamentary Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, on August 28th reiterated that Japan has no special visa programs or erased immigration policies or eased immigration policies for the African countries. He also acknowledged the ministry's slow response in preventing the spread of the misinformation. So this comes from Asahi on August the 28th. Thank you very much for this, Rossi. It's it helps us a lot, and I appreciate it deeply. And yes, okay, with this, let me move down and see. Okay, yes. All right, and then once again, Mr. Hidefumi Doi wrote that JICA didn't require official corrections to this, to this article, to the misinformation. So hopefully it will happen. And now we are moving to YouTube, and Hiroaki has a question there. So he writes, do you expect secondary sanction tariffs to be imposed or power down in Trump's administration? What do you think, Timothy?
I'm always afraid when Hiroaki joins and lobs in a couple of questions because I sense he already knows what the answers are and he's just teasing me. He's tempting me. But yeah, I think the negotiations between Japan and the United States are going to hit a bumpy road. And I think the United States is pushing really hard, and Japan has been somewhat accommodating. They've received the benefit of many trade agreements. We'll give them that. You know, the automobile industry here, you know, 50% of the economy is reliant on automobiles, automobile parts, and that sort of industry. And part of that is because they have, you know, free trade agreements throughout the world, and they build a really good product. But yeah, I think it's going to be tough. The Japanese need to wean themselves away and develop other industries. And that's why you're seeing this enormous push for defense industry and for, you know, staying within the confines of Article 9 of the Constitution, not offensive weaponry, but defensive weaponry. And the sale of these destroyers, you know, to Australia, they're destroyers. That's not defensive. That sounds offensive. But it is an industry that they could specialize in. You know, the drones, the enormous amount, the proportion of the request for the defense budget for 2026 is on drones and drone technology, underwater drones, above air drones, on the sea level drones, for the southern part of Japan to kind of be the advanced warning system, or maybe to be able to protect Japan. But they're putting a lot of money into that technology. And what they want to do is they want to manufacture it here. They want to embed Japanese technology into it and then sell that overseas. So real world experience on building these kinds of machines, this kind of technology, you know, enhances their ability to sell it elsewhere. And I think it's a very attractive opportunity for Japan. But they've got to back off from automobiles, and I think that that's going to hurt, and it's going to make negotiations much more difficult. And yes, there could be secondary tariffs as Japan stiffens its back and says, we're not going to do it anymore. Who knows what's going to happen?
Right. Okay. And now moving up the comments on LinkedIn, we've got a comment or a question actually from Rossi again. And it comes, will the recent Washington ruling on tariffs as being illegally imposed apply to Japan or Japanese imported goods? How are Japanese industry experts starting to reach or starting, sorry, I'll start from the beginning. How are Japanese industry experts starting to react to this ruling?
Okay, so it's important to note that there is a court in the United States that has said these tariffs, they don't have the firm foundation of law. And the president of the United States has said, so what? We're still moving forward, and sue us if you want to. So I think irrespective of that ruling, the Trump administration is moving forward and implementing those. And maybe a legal challenge, it will be tried in the courts. In the meantime, this takes months. This could take years actually to resolve. In the meantime, the Trump tariffs are being imposed. People are paying them. They're trying to benefit from that gap of being allowed to trade with the United States and reap the benefits there, but you're paying, through your teeth to participate. And I think that's the whole thing that's going on here. But it's not just Japan; it's the rest of the world too. I think the president of the United States has dug his feet in and said, "I'm the president of the United States, and I will continue to do this. And if you have a different view on it, you can sue my administration, but see where that gets you." So there is. He appoints judges, and many of the courts have been appointed by the previous administration. So they want to slow this path forward, whether you think it's the destruction of democracy or, dictatorship or that sort of thing. I mean, there are a lot of different arguments there. So I think, it's wise for the Japanese economists to take that into consideration, that the president of the United States, he's not only does he have enormous power, but he's exercising it. And so he is pushing the envelope a little bit. And he's making great inroads. Japan and the United States relationship will probably transform as a consequence of that. Likewise with South Korea. So when the South Korean president was in Washington, D.C. just this last week. Wait a minute. He was in, because he was in Tokyo Monday and Tuesday, and then he went to Washington, D.C. Wednesday and Thursday. The number of U.S. troops stationed there and how much South Korea is going to pay for their defense, it's a transformation that's occurring not just here, not just in Okinawa, not just in the Philippines, but also in South Korea too. And this is for a long-term play. So I think people waited for the Trump tariffs to be announced. So you'll remember that the trade volumes began to diminish because people were worried that if they started the trade and with automobiles and automobile parts, for example, and the tariffs came in, that they would be retroactive to the time that he first stated that. So things were really on a pause here. I think everybody that's in Japan realizes and remembers those, January, February, March, April, it was really, business was just on a standstill waiting for what shoe is going to fall next. So the fact that they made that decision, there's still a lot to be hammered out in the details, but the fact that they finally made a decision really kind of opened the doors. And I think you've seen it too, Maya, that business has really started to relax. It's started to be a little bit more robust, and September is going to be a blockbuster month. I guarantee that.
Yeah, indeed. All right, thank you for this. And also we've got a question from Greg on YouTube. And the question is, speaking of JICA, is Japan losing out on opportunities in Africa to China? Because China is dumping a lot of investment there.
Yeah. Well, China's been at it for the last 10 years. And the Japanese, Greg already knows this. He's a Japan hand of many years experience. I don't think he's um, had JICA experience, but he's been in corporate Japan for several years, and so he knows how the game is. And I think for Japan, their typical way of playing diplomacy, they've been criticized for it, is checkbook diplomacy. They get involved in major projects, and part of their investment or their support there is please buy Kubota tractors and please buy, the cement mixers that are made by Mitsubishi and that kind of thing. So it's tied foreign direct investment, and the Chinese do it quite a bit differently. But from what I've heard, is the quality is not up to great standards, and some of the roads that they build in building these big projects, they don't stand up to the test of time. Whereas one of the things that Mr. Modi was here talking to the Prime Minister about was the Shinkansen. The Shinkansen is famous throughout the world for its timeliness, for its accuracy, for its construction, for all of these high-end criteria. And Mr. Modi would love to have Shinkansen in India. They could use it, but it would probably be an Indian Shinkansen with Japanese technology. They don't need to import lock, stock, and barrel the Shinkansen. Australia went through the same things. Australia likes the Shinkansen, but they don't want to buy lock, stock, and barrel. And in fact, China has their own Shinkansen, and it's much cheaper. It's much easier to import and to erect, but it's not quite the Shinkansen. But from what I've heard, the Chinese Shinkansen is really fast and quiet, and so who knows? Who knows if the quality withstands the test of time? But yeah, JICA is trying to catch up, and I think the support of TCAD was an attempt to do that. I didn't see that there's a lot of force moving it forward, but I do know that Japan and the the like-minded countries need to counter the BRICS approach to Africa being championed by China. And they've made great inroads, but I think they've had time to kind of weigh it and sense, we've built highways and bridges and that sort of thing, but the relationship with China is a little bit overbearing, and we've got all these Chinese workers that are here. We thought we were going to be employing some of our own nationals to skill up and to learn how to pour concrete and build construction, but it's these Chinese workers. And so it's a different way of doing it.
Right. Yes. And yeah, Japan has been trying to compete with China on investment practices in Africa for 15 years, over 15 years now, and it still seems to be a challenge for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for the programs they have for investment there. And well, we can see why it is a challenge, of course, because China is a growing economy still, even though it's going through a difficult period, while the Japanese economy is mature, and it's more difficult for a mature economy to justify what they're doing and, just invest as much as China is investing at the moment. Of course, these are not the only reasons. There are other reasons as well. But let me move on. And
Thanks for the question, Greg.
Thank you very much for this. Yes, and we have a comment from Manabe-san about defense production, defense equipment production, right? So Manabe-san says defense industry will do better with England. And of course, Rossi says, well, could you please, Timothy, comment on this as well?
Japan will do better
with England. Yes,
in the defense production industry with England as compared to what, somebody else?
Well, I imagine it's as compared to probably the United States. Manabe-san, if you can help us here, clarify, then it will be helpful.
So one of the things that the Trump administration wants to do, it wants to bring shipbuilding back to the United States. And that's why the tariffs on steel and aluminum are implemented. They want, and also the Nippon Steel and US Steel, that kind of amalgamation. They want to produce in the United States, and they want to produce at the basic industry. So that means steel and the critical industries. And then from there, It's not a leap from steel production into shipbuilding. But the United States has distanced itself from shipbuilding for many decades, and they've kind of outsourced it to Korea, to India, to Malaysia for building these ships. Japan does a great job, but it's been focused mostly on the commercial tankers and freighters and that sort of thing, not so much on the defense industry. But now they're not only just destroyers, but the Kaga, the aircraft carrier, it's not quite an aircraft carrier, but I think it qualifies as an aircraft carrier. This new technology, this new machine, it's an aircraft carrier for helicopters, but also it can handle the F-35s, right? And also the frigates that they've sold a fleet of to Australia. It tells you that they're coming up to speed very quickly, high technology, the radar detection, that sort of thing. And it's not just, the surface vessels, it's also the submarines as well. So, the United States wants to bring that industry back home, but I think they've got to acknowledge that Japan has got a role to play too. And for the British, the British have they have their own steel industry. They've got their coal industry. They've got a huge tradition, a very long tradition of shipbuilding. So I don't know. I think what the question is referring to is this relationship that Japan has with Italy and Britain on the next generation fighters that will be in production. They'll be in production, but probably released in 2035 or so. And in fact, these fighters, these new advanced fighters, there's nobody sitting in the cockpit. They're basically drones. They're being flown by somebody else, either autonomously or somebody sitting in a bunker, thousands of miles away. So this is huge leap in technology. I don't know if that extends to drone manufacturing or frigates or aircraft carriers, that sort of thing. But I know that Japan is hungry to develop that defense industry capability, because they see that the automobile is kind of moving in a different direction, and a lot of other countries pride themselves in their own automobile production, and they've tried airplanes. I think the United States and maybe maybe some of the other countries have better technology. They can build the full package of airplanes. Japan is good at some things, but not in producing the whole aircraft as a unit. But for defense equipment, I think Japan is designing that this is something that they can excel at and have a global market share. And I think that's the push that's behind that.
Right. Thank you for this. And Timothy, I think that this is the time for you to jump and say, yay. So I'm free to go. All right.
Yes, but I'm not on the boat. So as you can see, my attire is a little bit different than when I'm reporting from the deck of the good ship Grims. But, I just got back yesterday, so I've still got a little bit of jet lag. The congestion from the airplane has got my sinuses is congested, but it's great to be back. And boy, September starts tomorrow, and I've got to tell you, it's going to be a really exciting month.
All right. It seems that there is one more question which came at the last moment, and I imagine it is once again from Rossi. So please hold on.
Okay.
So the question is, how are we meant to understand this U.S. interest in steel and local shipbuilding in light of recent statements from U.S. officials that suggest preparation not for defense but for outright war? A war with whom? So I think you touched upon this a little bit, but it actually, is more than only that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I caught the whole thrust from Rossi's question, but the whole point here is not to have war, but to have deterrence, to show so much overwhelming force should kinetic action be taken that the response will be so massive that you just don't have a chance. And we don't talk, it's not completely Japanese politics, but there's stuff going on in Israel and Iran today that kind of suggests the same thing. People don't want war, but if there's going to be war, at least, you get in it to win. So you develop your defense infrastructure, you develop your arsenal of goods and products to defend yourself, or to maybe to launch preemptive strikes. So that's a very volatile area there. There was an American stealth fighter that was shot down by Russia in the Black Sea just this last week. The Russians thought it was a Ukrainian craft, and it turned out to be an American stealth fighter. So that could be considered that's a, he's flying in, or the stealth fighter was flying in international airspace and was attacked and shot down. It's big news for a lot of different reasons, but it is also potentially a trigger for an escalation that nobody wants. So having all these ships, having all this defense equipment, having these alliances with like-minded countries, it's not to prepare for war. But yeah, you're kind of right. If you're not preparing for war, then what the hell are you doing? But it's also to just show your adversary that it's not going to be worth it if you move forward in the way that we deem you to be wishing to move. So reconsider your options, and I think it all really depends on Taiwan. I think that's the whole issue that we're talking about here. We're not talking about North Korea, South Korea. That's a volatile area, but there's no war footing that's going on there. But Taiwan is the flashpoint, and that's the whole explanation for why everything else is going on, including Okinawa and the frigates to the Philippines, and the Australia purchase of the destroyers, and the visit of the Prince of Wales. I mean, it's hugely volatile, but it's not in. I don't know. I say it's not in preparation for war. We're not on a war footing, but I think it's to show that there is an integrated core of allied, like-minded countries that should something happen, everybody has a piece of the puzzle, and it will not be worthwhile in the short term or in the long term to move forward. That's the signal, I think, that is trying to be adroitly conveyed. And sometimes you convey it through words, and sometimes you just convey it by a presence, as the Prince of Wales shows by visiting Tokyo Bay.
Yeah, and we've got a question from Diana, and she writes about this. Don't you think this approach is just old fear-based thinking?
I do. It's fear-based thinking, but it is also an economic driver. So to have these technologies and to build these things, because you have to address the fear, and the way to address this fear is to arm yourself, and to have coalitions of governments and sharing of secret and sensitive technology, and thereby other technologies, consumer good technologies, also advance as a consequence of that. I mean that was the global lesson from the defense industry complex that was developed by the United States in the 50s and the 60s. It led to an arms race. It led to launching rockets to the moon, but it also had great application for the consumer market as well. So I think people are studying that and seeing this is a reason to sell products, and it also generates a revenue, and downstream we can build other products. And I don't know. I think that's more the theory, but I would like to believe that it's not because people want to get into war. They want to send soldiers over to die. I mean, look at North Korea sending their soldiers, their sons, into a far-off country, and I don't think they did very well. I don't think the soldiers did very well. They didn't speak Russian. They were just sent to protect certain areas, and they suffered huge casualties as a result of that. So that's got to leave a mark.
Right. Well, I don't think that people want to send their children there. It's not the people, basically. It's the military-industrial complex that is willing to start to initiate conflict. So I think that we're talking about two different things. Yeah. And the point is that when it comes to an industrial complex willing to sell and to create revenue streams, the ordinary people don't have that much power. And I think that's the concern of most people like Diana and me as well. Sure. So yes, of course, it is a revenue stream, once you create it, but the point is that at the end of the day, it turns into destruction.
And you also become an attractive target.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Right. Okay, and I do believe that the rhetoric nowadays is more towards creating fear, so that based on this fear in the general population, it will be easier to sell the weapons.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yes. Okay, but this is a deeper topic, and I think that we can talk about this later on again. Now, for today, thank you very much, everybody, for staying with us, for listening in, and also for your comments, questions, and also for hitting like, subscribe, and for sharing this briefing with everybody you think might benefit from it. So, Timothy, thank you very much for preparing for it and for being here once again. I hope that your nose gets better soon, and that you also enjoy the weekend. Okay,
Can't wait.
Cannot wait. Yes. One more thing, I mentioned it in the beginning. Please check out the links also in the comments. On September 6th, next Saturday, Richard Walton and Whitecaps are organizing a baseball experience. And if you want to join the event and meet people there, if you want to network, please message Richard. He is on LinkedIn, or just visit the link and see how you can join the event directly. That's all
Maya,
for
have you ever
today.
been to a professional baseball game here in
No,
Japan?
no.
That doesn't surprise me.
Of course not. Okay, of course, at some point that will happen. And to anybody else who hasn't been to such a professional baseball event, please join Richard next Saturday, if your calendar, if your schedule allows. And for the time being, thanks a lot. Have a great Sunday. Enjoy the weekend. And also, have a bright week. We'll be here
Thanks.
once again on Sunday next week at 8:20 Japan time in the morning. That's all for today. Thanks a lot.
See you then. Thanks, Maya.
See you then.